The fluorescent lights buzzed overhead as I stared at the circle of folding chairs in that community center basement on Magazine Street. 12 chairs. 12 people who were about to hear me say the words I'd been avoiding for 3 years. My name is Marcus, and I'm an addict. But what happened in that circle over the next 6 months? It wasn't just recovery, it was a complete spiritual awakening that taught me how the universe is listening to every thought, every intention, every desperate prayer we send out into the void. This is the story of how I went from sleeping on my sister's couch in the French Quarter, stealing from my own family to feed a habit that nearly killed me, to building the life I'd only dreamed about. Not through willpower alone, though God knows I needed that, but by discovering something I'd never heard of before, the law of attraction. And before you think this is just another recovery story with a pretty bow on it, let me tell you, what I learned about manifestation in those basement meetings changed everything about how I saw myself, my addiction, and my power to create the life I actually wanted. 3 years earlier, I was a different man. 41 years old, working construction in New Orleans East, supporting my daughter Keisha, who was starting college at Dillard University. I had dreams, wanted to start my own contracting business, maybe buy a house in Algiers Point where I grew up watching the sun rise over the river. But somewhere between Hurricane Ida destroying half my work sites and my ex-wife remarrying, I found myself reaching for pills to numb the pain. What started as a prescription for a back injury became something darker, something that turned me into a person I didn't recognize. The day I stole money from Keisha's college fund was the day I knew I'd lost myself completely. My sister Denise found me passed out in her hallway at 3 a.m., empty bottle beside me, and gave me the ultimatum that probably saved my life. Get help or get out. But here's what nobody tells you about rock bottom. Sometimes you have to dig deeper before you can find the foundation to build on. That first Tuesday night at the Bywater Community Center, I walked into what I thought would be just another support group. Circle of chairs, bad coffee, people sharing war stories about their worst moments. I'd been to 3 other groups in the past month, and they all felt the same. Helpful, sure, but like we were just managing damage rather than actually transforming our lives. This group was different from the first minute. The facilitator was a woman named Grace, maybe 65, with silver locks and eyes that seemed to see straight through your excuses. But it wasn't traditional addiction counseling she was offering. Before we talk about staying clean, she said, we need to talk about why you want to live. She introduced concepts I'd never heard before: vibrational alignment, conscious creation, the idea that our thoughts create our reality, even our addiction. Your addiction isn't just a disease, Grace explained during my second meeting. It's also a pattern of thinking, a way you've been unconsciously manifesting experiences that match your deepest beliefs about yourself. I almost walked out. This sounded like New Age nonsense to a man who'd grown up in the 9th Ward going to Baptist church every Sunday. But something about the way she said it, and the way the other group members nodded like they'd discovered something life-changing, made me stay. What Grace said next would completely shift how I understood my addiction and my power to overcome it. Marcus, she said during week 3, when I finally opened up about feeling like a failure as a father, what if I told you that every time you tell yourself, I'm not good enough, I always mess things up, or I'll never change, you're actually placing an order with the universe? What if your addiction is just the universe delivering exactly what you've been asking for? It felt like a punch to the gut because it was true. My internal dialogue was brutal. I'd been telling myself for years that I was weak, that I'd inherited my father's addictive personality, that men in my family were destined to let people down. Grace introduced us to the work of Dr. Joe Dispenza and his research on breaking the habit of being yourself. She explained how neural pathways in addiction aren't just about the substance. They're about the identity we've unconsciously created through repetitive thinking. Before you can change your behavior, she said, you need to change your story about who you are. That night, I went home to my sister's couch and tried something Grace had suggested: visualization. Not just imagining being sober, but actually seeing myself as the man I wanted to become, successful, present for my daughter, building something meaningful with my hands and my mind. But let me be real with you. This wasn't some magical overnight transformation. Week 4, I relapsed. took pills I found in Denise's medicine cabinet, and showed up to group high, ashamed, ready to quit everything. "Good," Grace said when I confessed. "Now you know the difference between trying to think your way out of addiction and actually raising your vibration to match the person you're becoming." She taught us about something called the state of being, how addiction keeps us stuck in patterns of lack, shame, and desperation, which only attract more experiences that match those feelings. "Recovery isn't about fighting your addiction," she explained. "It's about becoming so aligned with your highest self that addiction simply doesn't fit in your life anymore." That's when she introduced us to a practice that would change everything, and I mean everything, about my relationship with myself and my future. Week 6, Grace taught us Neville Goddard's technique of living from the end. Instead of trying to get clean, we would practice feeling and thinking as if we were already the person we wanted to become. Every morning before the cravings hit, before the self-doubt crept in, I would spend 20 minutes in what Grace called the state of the wish fulfilled. I'd close my eyes and feel what it would be like to own my own construction company. I'd imagine the weight of business cards in my pocket with my name and general contractor printed beneath it. I'd visualize Keisha calling me for advice instead of avoiding my calls. I'd feel the satisfaction of depositing my first big check, the pride of pointing to a house I'd built and saying, "I made that." But here's the key. Grace taught us it wasn't about the wanting, it was about the gratitude for what was already ours. The universe responds to feeling, not need, she'd say. When you feel grateful for your sobriety, your business, your relationship with your daughter, as if they already exist, you're manifesting from abundance instead of lack. Week 8, something shifted. I started noticing what Grace called signs from the universe, little confirmations that my internal work was creating external changes. A man at Home Depot overheard me talking to another customer about foundation work and asked for my card. I didn't have one yet, but something made me say, "I'm starting my own company. Let me get your number." My sister Denise mentioned that her neighbor needed someone to fix her front steps. Small job, but when I quoted her a fair price and showed up on time, she recommended me to 3 other people on her block. Keisha called for the first time in 2 months. Not because she needed money, just to check on me. "Dad," she said, "you sound different, stronger." These weren't coincidences. Grace explained how synchronicity works when we're in vibrational alignment with our goals. "The universe is always matching your energy," she said. "When you shift from victim consciousness to conscious creator consciousness, opportunities start appearing everywhere." But the biggest test of everything I was learning was still coming, and it would either prove that this law of attraction stuff was real or shatter my newfound hope completely. Month 4 of the program, I got a call that could have destroyed everything. My old dealer, knowing I'd been clean, offered me a job. Not selling, just helping him move some equipment. "Easy money," he said. $500 for 2 hours of work. I needed that money. My savings were gone. I was behind on the money I owed Denise for letting me stay with her, and I had exactly $43 in my checking account. Standing in that parking lot outside the community center before group started, I felt every old pattern trying to pull me back. The voice in my head saying, "You're broke anyway. You're not really changing. This manifestation stuff is just wishful thinking." But then I remembered something Grace had taught us about Abraham Hicks and the concept of letting the universe orchestrate the how. Instead of grabbing at this opportunity that felt wrong in my gut, I decided to practice what she called inspired action. I walked into group and told everyone about the offer. "I'm going to trust that if I stay aligned with who I'm becoming," I said, "the right opportunity will show up." That night, I'm talking the same night, my phone rang. Number I didn't recognize, but something told me to answer. "This Marcus Williams who does construction work?" the voice asked. Turned out to be the contractor who'd gotten my number from 3 different people. His regular crew was overwhelmed, and he needed someone reliable for a 6-month project renovating a historic home in the Garden District. Not only was it legitimate work, it was the exact type of high-end restoration that could teach me skills I'd need for my own business. And the pay? More than double what my dealer had offered. "When can you start?" he asked. But that conversation was just the beginning of what would become the most transformative 6 months of my life. Working on that Garden District project, I wasn't just learning new construction techniques, I was practicing everything Grace had taught us about maintaining your vibration while building your dream life. Every morning, I'd start with gratitude practice. Not just for being sober, but for the tools in my hands, for the skills I was learning, for the trust this contractor was placing in me. Grace had taught us that gratitude is the fastest way to raise your frequency, and I was proving it to myself daily. I started using affirmations while I worked. I am a master craftsman. I build beautiful, lasting things. I am becoming the man my daughter can be proud of. At first it felt awkward, like I was lying to myself. But something Dr. Joe Dispenza had said in one of the books Grace recommended stuck with me. You have to break the habit of being yourself to become someone new. The contractor, James, started asking for my input on design decisions. He introduced me to the homeowners as his restoration specialist. By month 2, he was talking about future projects, bigger jobs, the possibility of a partnership. But the real transformation was happening in my relationship with myself. The universe was responding to my new self-concept in ways that still give me chills. Month 5, Keisha came to visit. First time she'd been to New Orleans since I'd gotten clean. I was terrified she'd see through whatever progress I thought I was making, that she'd still see the father who'd let her down. But when I picked her up from the airport, the first thing she said was, "Dad, your eyes are clear." We spent the weekend visiting the job site, walking through the French Quarter, having the kinds of conversations we used to have when she was little. She told me about her psychology classes at Dillard, her boyfriend, her dreams of maybe doing therapy work after graduation. "I want to help people the way someone helped you," she said as we sat on the levee watching ships move down the Mississippi. That's when I told her about Grace, about the group, about everything I'd learned about conscious creation and the power of intention. I expected her to think it was weird, maybe worry that I'd just replaced one obsession with another. Instead, she said, "That makes sense, Dad. In my psych classes, we're learning that addiction is often about trying to fill a hole that can only be filled from the inside." What she said next would become the foundation for the biggest manifestation of my new life. "Dad," Keisha said, "what if you combined what you're learning about construction with what you've learned about transformation? What if there are other people who need both?" She was right. Sitting in that circle every week, I'd met electricians, plumbers, painters, skilled tradesmen whose addiction had derailed their careers, but who had so much to offer if they could just get back on their feet. That night, lying in bed, I did something Grace had taught us about quantum manifestation. I didn't just visualize my own success. I imagined a bigger vision, a construction company that hired people in recovery, a place where learning to build beautiful things with your hands was part of learning to rebuild your life. I saw myself not just as a businessman, but as someone who could offer others what Grace and that circle had offered me. A chance to discover that you're not broken. You're just operating from an old story that doesn't serve you anymore. 6 months after that first night in Grace's circle, I was ready to graduate from the program. But instead of just moving on, I asked Grace if I could start a group specifically for people in the trades who were dealing with addiction. "Marcus," she said, "I've been waiting for someone to ask me that question." Turns out she'd been planning to expand the program but needed someone who understood both recovery and the construction world. She offered to train me in the facilitation techniques she used to help me blend traditional support with universal laws and manifestation principles. James, my contractor, was so impressed with my work and my story that he offered to be a partner in my new venture. Not just the construction business, but a workforce development program that would train people in recovery while they learned to apply law of attraction principles to rebuilding their lives. We called it Foundation and Future, because you can't build a lasting structure without a solid foundation. And you can't create a solid foundation without a clear vision of what you're building toward. But the moment that proved to me that the universe really is listening was still coming, and it involved the person who mattered most. 1 year after I'd stolen from Keisha's college fund, I was able to write her a check for twice the amount I'd taken. Not just to pay her back, but to fund a scholarship she wanted to create for students studying addiction counseling. When I handed her that check at her graduation from Dillard, She looked at it and then at me. "Dad," she said, "I'm not just proud that you got clean. I'm proud of who you became." That night, sitting in the same spot on Denise's couch where I'd once planned to end my life, I thought about everything Grace had taught us. About how your thoughts create your reality. About how raising your vibration isn't just positive thinking. It's actively choosing to align with the highest version of yourself. I thought about all the men who'd come through our Foundation and Future program in the past year. Guys like me who'd thought they were broken, who'd believed the story that addiction was just what happened to people like us. Instead, they'd learned what I'd learned, that addiction often thrives in the gap between who we are and who we know we're capable of becoming. And that manifestation isn't magic. It's the practice of closing that gap through aligned thinking, feeling, and action. Today, Foundation and Future has trained 43 men and women in construction trades while supporting their recovery journey. Our gratitude practice isn't just personal anymore. It's part of how we start every workday, acknowledging the opportunity to build something beautiful, both for our clients and for ourselves. I still go to that circle every Tuesday night, but now I co-facilitate with Grace. And every week, I watch new people discover what I discovered. That you're not a victim of your circumstances, your genetics, or your past mistakes. You're a conscious creator with the power to write a new story about who you are and what's possible for your life. The tools that helped me overcome addiction, visualization, affirmations, vibrational alignment, attracting abundance through gratitude rather than desperation. These aren't just recovery techniques, they're life techniques. Recovery taught me that hitting bottom isn't the end of your story. It's just the moment when you finally stop digging and start building. And creating your dream life isn't about pretending your struggles didn't happen. It's about transforming those struggles into the foundation for something stronger than you ever thought possible. That community center basement where I first heard about the law of attraction, we've expanded the program to 3 locations across New Orleans now. Every circle of chairs represents another group of people discovering that they have the power to manifest not just sobriety, but the life they actually want to live. Because here's what I know for sure. The universe is listening to every thought you think, every story you tell yourself about who you are and what you deserve. And when you decide to change that story, to align with your highest potential instead of your deepest fears, miracles stop being surprising. They start being inevitable. If this story resonates with you, if you're ready to discover your own power as a conscious creator, comment below, "I am ready to transform." And if you believe that every ending is actually a new beginning, hit that like button, subscribe for more transformation stories, and share this with someone who needs to remember that they're not broken. They're just ready to build something beautiful. Your foundation is stronger than you think. Your future is waiting for you to create it.